On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, it's all about the rookie.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, August the 13th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and of course, you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link is right down there in the description of the podcast. Whether you're listening on audio, watching on video, you can join us there. It's free to do, and you get to become part of our lovely listener community. We're rounding up managers for our fantasy basketball season this year. If you want to be part of that and are not in the Discord, jump on in, and all sorts of reasons to be in there. Talking amongst friends on the internet in a place that's not mean. What a wonderful thing. Come join us in the Discord family. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Much appreciated, when you support the show on the audio side of things. However it is you do so on the app of your choosing. You can also go to YouTube, subscribe to the Locked On Raptors YouTube channel. When you do that, there's a little notification bell button. You can press that, and you'll get a push notification to your device every single time the show is about to premiere or go live, so you never miss a second of that sweet mid-August Locked On Raptors action, baby. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And we get rolling here on a Tuesday episode of the show, middle of August, and all we have to do is look ahead to the Toronto Raptors season that lies before us a couple months away. The team is in Malaga, Spain, getting ready for the season, having some team building and bonding and all that fun stuff. And speaking of fun stuff, it's our pal Katie Heindl back on the show, fresh off of a couple of weeks, with the cottage and hanging out and just doing summer things. Katie, your summer vacation watch, my watch of your summer vacation, always very enriching. How the hell are you?
I'm doing good. Like we mentioned off the top, I have a little bit of Olympics withdrawal. But yeah, I've had some friends in town. I was away for a little bit, going away again. So it feels like I'm trying to make the most of the summer. It dawned on me this morning that it's August.
Yeah, the Olympics went real fast.
Yeah.
And I too am finding this massive void in my life where I'm waking up in the morning really wanting to watch kayak cross, and I can't find it, Katie. I guess I could go watch the replays of events I didn't see as they happened, but I think I watched all of the events, and my life is a chasm now.
Did you watch any show jumping, Sean?
I did not watch any show jumping, Katie.
So there
I
you
know
go.
I disrespected you and your
Quote, all
your
the
belief.
events.
All the events where the medals go to the deserving parties. Yeah, I'm saying I'm protesting because the horses don't get medals.
The horses don't have thumbs. What are they going to do with the medal? The Japanese rider who won the individual show jumping, you've probably seen, he took a really beautiful selfie with his horse, and his horse
That's great.
sticking its tongue out. So the good riders involve their horses. The horses, they'll get their own due rewards. They don't want a gold medal.
That's fair enough. They just want Nikola Jokic to watch them in action one day after winning a bronze medal.
Who went to any equestrian events?
That's a really good question.
I wish anyone there, Ben Golliver, you failed us. You should have asked him.
Yeah, he's just what's the guy's name? Ian Lamaze? Is that the guy? The Canadian? Am I making that up?
There's an Eric Lamaze and an Ian Miller.
Lamaze.
You blended them together.
Oh.
That's very impressive, Sean.
Okay, yeah. So yeah.
Honestly, you're 2 up on, I assume, the general population for knowing names of show jumpers.
Yeah. My favorite basketball players: LeBron Curry and Steph James. All right, we should talk about the Toronto Raptors, I guess.
Begrudgingly, sure.
Yeah, we're going to dive in today to the rookies of the Toronto Raptors, who there are many this year, 4 of them to be exact. If you're counting guys they took in the draft, you could add in Brandon Carlson as a 5th guy as well. though I don't expect he's going to get a ton of run for the big club this year. He feels like probably a 905 hand. Either way, a lot of guys in their first season of pro basketball coming into the mix this year, a mix of first-round picks in the form of Jacoby Walter, a couple second-rounders, 3 second-rounders with Jonathan Mogbo, Ulrich Chomche, and Jamal Shead, all of whom I think are in interesting spots within the team sort of structure and hierarchy. And I think we're going to get in a little bit to what things will look like at the 905. We'll get in a little bit to sort of predictions and, pipe dreams for this rookie class of Toronto Raptors as well. But I just want to get in off the top with a basic question to you, Katie. Who plays the most for the Raptors among the rookies this year? You've got Jonathan Mogbo, who's maybe sort of the guy who brings the positional scarcity, the size that they don't have in a lot of other spots in the roster. Jacoby Walter is the first round pick, the highly touted guy who fell to the Raptors at 19. They did not expect him to be there. Of course, Gary Trent Jr. is out, but there are a lot of other 2 guards on this roster competing for minutes. Jamal Shead might be the most seasoned of all these guys, a 4-year college player, very prolific winner in his time with Houston. But it's tough for point guards in year 1. I think you can go a lot of different ways with this, but who right now would you predict is going to get the most minutes for the Toronto Raptors among their class of rookies?
It's a good question because I think automatically your mind goes to Jacoby, but you think of Gradey Dick last year, and the team has said that they want Jacoby to follow the same trajectory and have time with 905 as much as he'll have with the Raptors, because I think they saw what wonders that did for Gradey Dick last year, especially toward the end of last season. So that's where I automatically thought, but I'm maybe going to change my mind and say it could be. I think it might be Shed. I think we might see more minutes for him coming off the bench. I mean, I'd love to see all these guys get regular team minutes, but I don't mean, not regular minutes as in steady. I meant regular. That was rude of me to call the Raptors the regular team. No disrespect to 905.
I think it's fine. You're fine.
It's okay.
People know what you mean.
I don't know. So
hurt bags down at 905, those irregular boys. No, you're not saying that.
There's just a lot of lovely people that work for the 905, and I don't. They work hard. So I think probably Shed, and I'd like to see him too. Because the Raptors certainly do have a point guard type.
Yeah, he is 100% their type in terms of just the type of guy he is and the profile he brings. And I think Jonathan Mogbo is going to get the most minutes just because very few people on the roster are of his dimensions. They need someone who's 6'6", 6'7", who has an enormous wingspan, who has a bit of ball skill. I think he's going to get some run as a backup 5 in stretches. I think he's going to get some run on the wing. That's what Bobby Webster kind of talked about him as being after the draft. They kind of really classified him purely as a wing, which I think is interesting. There's going to have to be some shooting progression there for that to make sense, or you're going to have to put him in lineups with shooting all around, which, I think there are some options for that. I could totally see a world in which, we see an Emmanuel Quickly, Gradey Dick, RJ Barrett, Kelly Olynyk, Jonathan Mogbo second unit where there's all kinds of shooting. Maybe it's a little light on defense, but the offense should flow pretty well. And it kind of allows Mogbo to, do his short roll thing as a screen and dive guy, an interior scorer, and not be sort of anchoring down lineups because he doesn't have any stretch to him. So there's that. I just think they need guys with size. Beyond RJ Barrett and Scottie Barnes, there's just not a lot of length to this lineup, these lineups they can throw out there. And I think in the NBA, that's only skewing bigger and bigger. It's just going to kind of necessitate run for Jonathan Mogbo. But I'm here for the idea that Jamal Shead could play more. I think, I've made my thoughts clear. I don't think Davion Mitchell's a point guard. I think he's probably going to be best as an off-ball sort of defensive ace guard who can play next to Emmanuel Quickly, guard opposing guards, but he's not going to play point guard on offense necessarily. I think Shead has a bit more of that sort of natural table setting sort of instinct. And because he's a 4-year college player, because there's some seasoning there, because as Bobby Webster said during a summer league game, he's lost 19 games in 4 years at college. He profiles as the kind of guy who could get some run pretty early on in his career. What did you were at Summer League, you watched these guys up close. What were your takeaways from Shead when it came to that specific thing, running the show, being a lead guard, table setter type guy. Obviously, the three-point shooting is going to be a thing that's a multi-year project for him, and that's going to sort of dictate his ceiling. But do you think there's enough there in terms of just general on-court management and sort of like a floor that he brings that could be NBA ready kind of right away?
I do. I think your point about the college experience is really apt. Just in terms of watching some of these younger guys play, because you and I talked before summer league, just like a lot of these guys are going to have an opportunity to play with the team. It's going to be a really rookie heavy, skewed young team. So I was curious to see how they gelled, and it all kind of came to them in real time at summer league. He definitely had the most experience, poise. He seemed to know where he should be in space. I feel I'll preface this with, like, every summer league I try and get like a screaming video, and it's a video of a player doing something, usually at the buzzer, or like finishing a play in a very acrobatic and intense way, and then screaming. Usually they fall and they scream. And it was Shead this year. It was cool. He like did this really acrobatic layup. He was driving to finish most of his possessions, which I liked too, because I think that's something that, especially with first year players, younger players, they can get a little bit tentative about trying to finish. And he did not. And he went flying, skidding toward me on the ground. I think Chomche picked him up, and then he got up and he screamed. So that always bodes well to me. And I just on your point on Mogbo, I want to say, is Mogbo or Mogbo? Mogbo. Jeez. Yeah. Anyway, Josh Lewenberg wrote a great profile piece about him a little while ago, but I recently went back and reread it, and it's wonderful in terms of the work that he put in. His alternate route really to getting picked. This wasn't a guy who was really scouted at all by any Division I schools. Sure. And he had to really, figure out his own way. And I think that, again, if we're talking about poise and experience, and yes, he's young, but I think it's like playing with a maturation beyond what you would anticipate. And we have seen that the Raptors do like that trait in their players. And I think with an especially stacked young team, that's extremely valuable.
100%. I do think Mogbo, he's going to be the oldest rookie on the team. He's going to be 23 in the first week of the season, right? So, yes, ancient
rookie.
There's a creaky old man. Yeah. I think, there's there's going to be a learning curve for everyone, right? No rookie steps in and is seasoned and driving positive play all the time. But I think an older guy who, I think there's also some sort of, he's kind of a strange anomaly when it comes to an older prospect, because usually you don't envision a hugely high ceiling for guys who come in a little bit later on at 22 or 23. They kind of, are where they are in their development curve, and there's not a ton of growth left. But I don't think that's really the case with Mogbo, because he's such a late bloomer, because there's still so much untapped in his game. And I think the ball skill that he brings, there's just a lot of interesting stuff that can be done around that. I'm fascinated to see how it all comes together. And, I'm rooting for lots of Jonathan Mogbo, because I like sort of large playmaking forward types, but also because, man, oh man, they need that kind of size on the floor. And I think he could be, sneakily, again, you don't want to over project for defense in a rookie season, but I think because of the dearth of other defensive options on this roster, there's a world in which we look at him as one of the better defenders on this team by the end of his rookie season as well, which I think is pretty exciting, or damning if you want to look at it with a half glass empty approach. We're going to come back on the other side, Katie, get into the 905 stuff. We're going to talk about Ulrich Chomche. We're going to talk about where Jamal Shead, Jacoby Walter, and Jonathan Mogbo might fit in down there. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only, available to U.S. customers. Back at it here with Katie Heindl from Basketball Feelings. A reminder before we continue on here, Locked On NBA, great place to go for your second listen of the day. We got a rotating cast of Locked On NBA hosts, our pals Nick Angstadt, Tony East, and more, running through the biggest in the NBA every single day throughout the offseason. There is no offseason for you little sicko NBA fans out there, and Locked On NBA is here to be there for you all the way through. Lots of Olympic post-mortem going on this week. Pretty cool Olympics we had. Basketball-wise, it was a good time. All right, let's get back to it, Katie, here. The 905. We know it's been a bit of a fallow period for 905 development, this machine of turning end-of-draft guys and undrafted players into staples of Toronto Raptors rotations over the last decade or so. It's been a little bit dry the last little while. Of course, that's partly the sort of post-championship tax, not having as many draft picks to work with. They've had some bad luck. Jalen Harris, DeJuan Hernandez, injuries, late draft guys, sort of suspensions and things like that. Christian Coloco, the whole thing going on with him and his medical situation, stuff that's befallen them that's been unfortunate, that's kind of cut into their developmental sort of core of guys. Seems now, with 4 guys coming in, that they actually have that sort of shadow core of dudes to start bringing along, and the 905 figures to be a big part of their plans this season. Let's start with Ulrich Chomche. I think a lot of people were surprised by maybe how he kind of overshot expectations for, I think going into the draft with like 3 professional games of tape on him, there was this sort of consensus that, he's super raw. There's not really much in terms of tangible NBA skill yet. It's all theoretical. And I think we saw in Summer League, Katie, that there's a little bit more to him right now than just this sort of theorizing of what he might be 5 years from now. The defensive instincts, the fluidity with which he moves, all that stuff, extremely, extremely exciting. We talked about and sort of went through our audible reactions to various flourishes where he'd run the floor with the ball in his hands and throw cool little lay down bounce passes and stuff. I think there was a lot more of the Ulrich Chomche package than we maybe were told that there would be by the experts out there. In fairness, those experts were going off of, again, 3 professional games of tape. What are your sort of hopes and dreams for Ulrich Chomche this year? I would assume it's going to be heavy 905 run. Which I think is right. I think it's probably the way to do it. And really, this feels like what the 905 was made for in the spirit of Bruno 10 years ago, right? Where they didn't really have a place to put this very long-term project to go and just sort of learn the ropes. So they started the 905. They haven't really had one of these types of guys who is that sort of longer-term investment play. And now he's going to get to go down there and I think kind of sort out a lot of the things that needs to be sorted out for a guy who's going to hopefully be a piece for this team going into the future. What are your sort of expectations and the things you're looking forward to from Ulrich Chomche, likely with heavy 905 run this year?
Yeah, I think he fits the ethos of why the team first, like as you mentioned, wanted to bring their G League affiliate closer so that they could have more control over these kind of levers and valves. So you've got athletes going there to level up, but then you need them to be able to come to the parent club and test those skills out in real time. Sure. And I think Chomche is a good example because, as you know, he was one of my highlights of Summer League. Like, he really did stick out to me just in terms of the flashes of what you could see happening and developing with him. And I think for a guy like him, it doesn't strike me as like he could develop extremely well in the 905 and in the G League and just kind of stay there. But he definitely needs someone to he's the kind of person who needs to test those skills against real proxies, right? So like in the NBA, if he can. Because I think his trajectory is going to be more like a Pascal Siakam style. And I mean, to be fair, everyone develops like this. We just don't really give it a lot of credit. Like, no one just goes up and up and up, right? There's plateaus. So I think for him, like what you mentioned, you touched on it, like there's more there than maybe anybody anticipated. But to me, that's quite natural because it's like, yeah, you're learning all these skills, you're putting them all together in real time. Some of it's going to stick. You're going to look better at times, and then other stuff you hit that plateau, and it seems like you're not developing, but you have to actually just like acclimate once again. And I think for someone like him, real-time acclimation is going to be really valuable. So again, the fact that the team is, so close and there and ready, and that they've started, I'd say last year, firing up again. If we're going to go this like machine analogy, I feel like the locomotive is starting to really speed up once more of what the developmental pipeline looked like between the 905 and the Toronto Raptors. And I think he's really poised to be in there, though. I mean, like, I don't know. I'm not that precious about the games that the team needs to win this season.
Yeah.
So if there's opportunity to bring him in to just like get some throw around minutes with the Raptors this season on like a Tuesday night game and as early as November, I'm all for it,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to your point, the wins ain't the thing to keep an eye on this year. It'd be nice if they got some surprise ones and looked a little further ahead than maybe it feels like they are right now. But certainly, and speaking of positional scarcity, I mean, we've gotten into the backup center situation. They don't really have a natural backup center right now. Bruno Fernando might be that. I think it's pretty clear Kelly Olynyk's a stretch 4 and should be playing there for the lion's share of his minutes. So there should be, if Jonathan Mogbo is more sort of, soaking up those wing minutes and not, a day one small ball center sort of visionary player, which seems unlikely, that there's probably going to be some time there to soak up for whoever they can get in there in their big room. And Chomche is going to be one of those guys. He's on the two-way. I'm actually glad, Katie. I thought there was a chance he would kind of be one of those stash guys where you take him and you just sort of don't see him for a couple of years. I'm glad they brought him over for the two-way. Yes, it takes up one of those two-way spots, but the third two-way spot gives you the luxury of kind of slow playing one of those spots. And so I'm pretty excited to see sort of what the progression is and those little flourishes where, okay, yeah, there's a 905 game and a Raptors game in the same day. We'll get Chomche in for one, and then we'll get him in the NBA game and see what he's got. I think that could be fun, but I do expect it's going to be mostly 905 duty.
Yeah.
And that's where I think Jamal Shead becomes super interesting here, because I think we both agree he's probably, if not the most ready, one of the two most ready guys to step into NBA minutes right now. But I also think there's something to the idea of playing him in the 905 with Chomche a bunch. We've seen the impact watching Kyle Lowry play for the Toronto Raptors that a sort of steady-handed lead guard type can have on big men. Kyle Lowry got a lot of big men paid during his time with Toronto. It's not to say Jamal Shead is going to be Kyle Lowry. We have to stop, I think, sort of assuming that thing, even though it's very easy to do. But like, I do think there's value to having Shead kind of run the show down there, set up a sort of ecosystem where a big man like Chomche can thrive. And I'm thinking about the defensive tandem of those two guys, defending pick and roll together, which sounds absolutely nasty to go up against for the poor G League guards of the world. But what are your thoughts on that? Of sort of, yes, Shead could play in the NBA, and there's a positional need for a backup point guard right now, but maybe his role this season is better served kind of bringing along, and, obviously it's going to hone his craft too doing that, but bringing along a guy like Chomche kind of in tandem. I think there's maybe some legs to that idea of sort of keeping those guys tethered just to help the development of one another.
Yeah, and I think that also goes back to the experience we're talking about. Like, Shead's added experience could really lend well to Chomche, who needs to get caught up, not just on the floor stuff, but like there's a certain technical side of things too, right? Where it can help to have somebody explaining to you these things as they're happening, and then you go out and do them. So I think that will help. That's going to help Chomche immensely. If just like getting the kind of like the analytics, not the analytics of all. I'm trying to think of like,
it's sort of like
the brain and it's just like his brain and his body have got to move in tandem. And I think sometimes that's what can get more caught up and sticky, right? It's like you're learning a million things at once, especially for someone who, was working on a farm, I think like a year and a half ago, right? Like there's a lot of brain catch up to this brand new world that he's in. And I think having people around him who now have like, it's an added value for the Raptors that they have so much more experience. Maybe it was like a takeaway for them in the draft, but I think actually it could pair really well with the guys they really want to develop and bring along. So I think that works. I mean, also just like, on the floor side of what you're talking about, the two of them would be a nightmare, but very fun to watch.
Yeah. Just like the subtle craft of being a big man, right? Like where to set your screens, the sort of angling of it, how to present yourself as a target to a driving guard, right? Like there's all those little sort of intricacies of being a big man that, especially on offense for Chomche, are going to be the things that probably are the things that come along the slowest because it's hard to learn those nuances. But playing with a guy like Shead, who, seems to be very much team oriented, sort of guiding the ship type guy. I think there's a lot of merit to sticking those two together and seeing what they can make happen down with 905. I'm excited for 905 games, Katie. This has not been the case for a while. We're going to pick up this thread, talk a little about Jacoby Walter, and get into some final thoughts here on the Raptors rookies coming up in just 1 second to close out the show. Boy, oh boy, we're recording usually during my Olympic watching hours. My brain's not at full function right now. Rounding things out here on your Tuesday edition of Locked On Raptors. A quick reminder, Locked On Leafs, great place to go if you want off-season Leafs content as well. Mike and Dave doing a great job talking about the Buds and some news today in the form of Austin Matthews being named the captain, which apparently is like a tsunami of news in the NHL in the middle of August. Everyone's got a take on it, including our pals Mike and Dave over at Locked On Leafs. So go check that show out now or after you finish this one. Just stop listening. Go listen to the Leafs podcast, everybody. No. Please finish this show first. All right. Let's get into Jacoby Walter quickly here on the 905 thing. You mentioned earlier the idea of them kind of bring him along similarly to how they did with Gradey Dick. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I also struggle a little bit because Gradey Dick's time with the 905 last year, I think, while valuable, felt mostly like weight room related. And it felt like on the court, it was a tough thing for Gradey Dick to sort of make an impact in the 905 because he's the kind of player who's better playing off of better players. And, I think enhances better players too with his gravity and off-ball movement and all that stuff. And so with the circumstances of the 905 last year, I just found it was kind of a tricky fit for a guy like him. Maybe it's different this year if Jamal Shead's playing heavy minutes down there and Jacoby Walter can come in and kind of fly around off ball with a sort of real table setting point guard to play with, an anchoring big like Chomche. Like I think there's probably a better ecosystem for that kind of movement shooter type in this year's upcoming 905 ecosystem than there was last year. But I also think there's something to the idea of if you are a movement shooter whose whole thing is off ball gravity and flying around away from the ball. We know Gary Trent Jr. is not on this team anymore. There's going to be some need for just some volume from 3-point range. Do you think there's a world in which Walter just kind of cuts his teeth at the NBA level a little bit more than maybe we're expecting? I don't think he's going to lead the team in minutes among rookies, but his play style maybe is conducive to playing with better players. I think it's interesting to sort of look at from both ends.
I think it's funny that you put it that way of like Gradey Dick is better when he plays with better players, but I also think you can't negate the fact that, the G League can be a bit of a dogfight. It's extremely scrappy.
Sure.
Some of those games are like, they have to be highlight reels for those guys because it's, they're all trying to make it to a parent team roster or an overseas contract. So there's always this idea of, this is like almost where teams like the Raptors are an anomaly because like, they're like, no, we want to develop through our G League arm. But most other teams are kind of like, well, no, this is like our audition every night.
Sure.
Anyway. So I think that's probably why Gradey looked so out of sorts sometimes because he just wasn't that big yet and he really wasn't that physical. But going back to, I think something that Jamma said at Summer League is that Jacoby, something they really liked about him is he is really tough and he isn't afraid of really getting into things and like kind of being hard nosed. And I think that's why he'll be more seamless in terms of a fit with 905 and, to your point, a fit with the Raptors at times as well, because I think there's a fluidity of like him understanding when he has to play a little bit ugly and to not be afraid of that. We did see that at Summer League, and then to know when to take a step back and to realize like if he's going to get minutes with the Raptors, it's going to be in a backup role. He's going to be coming into support. He's not really going to have the ball in his hands most of the time. And I think that transition can be tough too. I think that was actually kind of tough for Gradey to realize, to learning a backup role is sometimes a lot tougher than being like, okay, the ball's in your hands and you know what to do.
It's the first time these guys haven't been the best players on their team, right?
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I also think like that's such a transitional thing for your brain to go through that some people don't handle that well or handle that easily at first. Sure. So I think the team wants to take a similar route as what they did with Gradey, but I think they're going to watch Jacoby a bit closer because there's a spot for him. As you mentioned, there's a spot for him with the Raptors if he develops up to a point where they feel like he's ready to take it.
He's probably also, and this is nothing against Gradey Dick, but the entire organization spent last year calling him a 16-year-old. He's more physically advanced, I'd say, than Gradey Dick was this time last year. Like he's a strong dude. We know getting to the line is a thing he can do with great aplomb, and I'm excited to see if he can kind of translate that as a rookie. That's a tough thing to do, obviously, but rim pressure is never going out of style. If you can have guys and get to the rim and kind of make stuff happen there, that's always going to be valuable, and it's going to sort of enhance his value if he can do that while also kind of making good on the 3-point promise that he has. Obviously only shot 34% in college, but all the scouts sort of agree that, the volume is there to sort of indicate he knows that he's got the juice, that he thinks they're going in, which is half the battle. The sort of form and the movement and all that stuff, the difficulty of the threes he was taking, I think suggests that there is a better sort of true shooter in there than someone who shot 34% in 1 year at college. I'm excited to see, look, they're not going to win these minutes a ton, but I'm looking forward to seeing lineups where you have Walter and Dick together, right? Like, I think playing those two guys off of Scottie Barnes, we've seen the history of Scottie Barnes playing with guys who can shoot. Gary Trent Jr., Gradey Dick for stretches last season. Like, that's usually a pretty harmonious thing. And so maybe there's some lineups where you can run those two guys together and sort of, yes, that might get you some good results, but mostly it's kind of like a developmental thing where you're having those guys fly around away from the ball using Scottie Barnes' gravity as an on-ball force to sort of create looks for the team and get themselves into the sort of mindset of what it's going to be for them playing on a team that is centered around Scottie Barnes. I think that is going to be an interesting thing to watch this year. How much do we see Gradey Dick play with Jacoby Walter? I think there's maybe this sort of thought that they're competing for minutes with one another, but this team's kind of light on the wings, as we've talked about. There's room for multiple guys to get in there, especially, injuries happen, absences happen, that type of thing. I'm pretty excited for Walter and sort of seeing what the developmental track is for him, because I think it could go a few different ways this season. I want to ask you, Katie, before we get out of here, look, Raptors been a while since they had an all-rookie guy. Scottie Barnes was the last one, obviously. Before that, I think it had been quite some time since they had an all-rookie player. It's a weird draft class, of course. There's no doubt this guy's going to go and average 20 points a game as a rookie on this team type of guys. It feels kind of eerily similar to like 2014-15, if you recall, where like Nikola Mirotic and Nerlens Noel and Elfrid Payton all made first-team all-rookie. Langston Galloway was a second-team all-rookie guy. I think it could be kind of a weird year like that where it's just a different collection of dudes who kind of comprise those all rookie teams. Do you think there is an all rookie guy in the Raptors midst this year? And if so, who is it?
Wow. I think seasons like this where the field doesn't seem so stacked towards the top picks makes it more wide open, right? Someone can just show someone who shows right away they're super impactful for their team, or they develop steadily throughout the season, like kind of leading up to, I'd say, February, March, can make a really big impact and therefore like make an all rookie team. So that's my way of like couching this in some sensibility, but sure.
I don't bring sensibility to the table here, Katie. What are you talking about? That's not what we do. This is a nonsensical podcast.
These kinds of years are exciting because it's like anything does seem possible, right? Sure. With the rookies, it's not like we know for sure it's going to be XYZ. We don't really know at all who it's going to be.
So do you have a name Do you have
No.
someone? No. Okay.
I mean, I'd say the closest, I would probably pick Jacoby, just in terms of where he sat in the draft.
Sure.
Ironically, for someone who says the draft is a crapshoot, I recognize that. But yeah, I think in terms of everything we've talked about too today, of his immediate impact and where he's going to slot in, and most notably, like get visibility, have NBA visibility. I think he's closest.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll go Mogbo as the most
Okay.
likely, just because of, again, the positional scarcity thing. I think he's pretty advanced as far as basically everything but 3-point shooting. I think there's something there with him. The defense, the passing, the rebounding, the interior scoring. Like, it's all at a pretty interesting level for a guy who's coming into year one. And I just think there's going to be a need for a guy like that on this team. And so I'll go with him. But yeah, I don't think it's out of the question that one of these guys pops enough to get consideration for an all-rookie team. And that is a very exciting and fun thing. We do have a couple of listener questions. We'll get to one here, Katie, a very important one about rookies. From Duncan in the Discord, is Nathan Fillion potentially leaving The Rookie big news to you, or could you care less about the television show The Rookie?
I've never seen the show. Sorry.
Nathan Fillion's Canadian, right? Is that why this question's in here? Come on, Duncan. What are you doing?
Is The Rookie a CTV show?
It's an American show. Of course, the real answer here is don't watch The Rookie. Watch that great Canadian programming that is Rookie Blue on Global, baby. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't actually have mailbag questions that weren't already kind of part of what we talked about. So
I'm just watching questions. I'm just watching industry now that it's back, guys. That's what I'll say.
I'm watching like no shows, Katie. Like, it's like
you'd hate
Big
industry.
Brother.
You'd
We're
hate
on Big
it.
Brother and Alone. Yeah. We're in on Alone. It's this season of Alone is very, very good. Everyone should watch this season of Alone. They're not sponsoring the podcast. Why am I doing this? All right. We're going to leave it there because we have reached the summer portion of the podcast, and we're going to wrap it up. Do you have anything you want to promote for the good people out there, Katie?
Yeah, Industry Season 3. Jon Snow's in it. Jon Snow bricks a sandwich very close range into a garbage can, and I think it was a mistake, but it's very funny. Yeah, if you want to be stressed out and not understand maybe 60% of what the cast is talking about at all times because it's trading and investment banking, I'm not selling the show, but it's a really good show. And then I guess on the actual level, I wrote about something that had been lingering for me since the Olympics were over, was this idea of fandom and kind of the gaze of fandom, specifically Celtics fans being very irate that Jason Tatum didn't play during the Olympics, and the kind of quote larger meaning of that and what it means. But what I was most interested in is like, now fandom is kind of, it's no longer a two-way mirror. We're sort of like breaking down the barrier per Kevin Durant kind of talking about fans like going quote too far, but what does this mean in the future? Anyway, that's at Basketball Feelings if you care to read it.
Everyone should go read about that. Also, if you're interested in what's going on over in Spain, Katie promoted yesterday a piece from last year about the sanctuary in Malaga, Spain, where the Raptors are going to be hanging out for the next little while. If you want to go read about what that's all about through the NBAPA, it's on Katie's socials as well. If you want to go and read that. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Thanks for following, subscribing, rating, reviewing, telling a friend. Much appreciated as always when you support the show. However it is you choose to support the show, just do it in one way, please. You don't have to do everything, but if you want to do everything, go to YouTube, go to the apps, tell friends, scream it from the rooftops to listen to Locked On Raptors. You can go ahead and do that as well. We're going to leave it there. We'll be back again tomorrow. Oren Weisfeld's going to be on. We're going to put a bow on the Olympics and what it all meant for Canada basketball on the men's and women's sides. Bit of a disappointing run for both teams. What does that mean going into LA 2028 and beyond? And yeah, on Thursday, Jamar Hines will be along. We're going to talk about the Raptors bench and how it's going to be comprised as well. Maybe some of them rookies we talked about today, we'll figure into that conversation as well. In the meantime, thanks so much for hanging. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye. That was almost in. If not, we could take it to the review.